Assalamu alaikum. Today we're going to continue talking about page replacement algorithms. In fact, we have started that. So the concept, whenever we have a page fault, then we need to swap a page that is not in memory, bring it in to replace another page that is in memory, okay? In fact, our aim at the very beginning is to bring a page that is not in memory to bring it to memory. So if you have an empty frame, then we settled. We restart the instruction after that, okay? And of course, doing the appropriate changes on the page table, right? However, if we don't have an empty frame, then we need to choose a victim, one of the pages in the frames used by the process, okay, which we call them the working set, right? We need to choose one of these pages to be swapped out. Which one of it? That's the replacement algorithm we are using, okay? We have discussed previously two replacement algorithms, the FIFO replacement algorithm, okay, and the optimal replacement algorithm. We demonstrate how these algorithms work by looking at what we call a reference string or page reference string of a process, right? So we mentioned, for example, that this string means that the process references the first page, and then the second, then the third, and so, right? Which means the process is referring to an address that is within the first page, and then the second page. For example, at this step, the first page again, and so. So we call this what? Page reference string for a particular process. So we trace the algorithm using a given string, okay, to see how, or to demonstrate how does it work. So this was the FIFO, and we demonstrated using this example a process that's given 3 empty frames, means that's the size of the working set of the process. And this is the reference string of it, i.e. it references page 7, then 0, then 1, then 2, and so, right? So initially, the very first 3 references, if they are different pages, will result in 3 page faults. At the beginning, 7 is not in memory, that's a page fault, swap it in, and we already have an empty frame. At this point, we did not need to use any replacement algorithm because we already have an empty frame. The same thing for 0, 1. So we have 7, 0, 1. 3 page faults, but we did not use the replacement algorithm. Now at this point, 2, the process referencing page 2. Page 2 is not in memory. So what we needed is to use a particular replacement algorithm. In this case, for example, it's FIFO. It says the one that was first in is the victim. Okay, and the one that was first in is 7, so it is the victim, replaced, okay, with the page 2, okay? And then we continue after that. 0 is not in memory, or is in memory? Is in memory, right? So in this case, we don't need a page replacement algorithm to use. However, when the process references 3, 3 is not in memory, so we use the page replacement algorithm. In this case, it says the one that was first in to be first out. And the one that was first in is 0. So 3 will replace 0, and so on. We also talked about the optimal algorithm. The optimal algorithm is, we said, is the best of all, right? However, it depends on knowledge from the future referencing, page referencing of a process, which is something that we can't know, right? But we studied this, and we show how does it work, because it can be used as a benchmark, okay, or to show how near we are to the optimal solution. How near we are to the optimal solution, if we are, for example, designing a new algorithm or so. So we see the way it works. Again, reference string 7, you have an empty frame. So swap it in, and we did not use a replacement algorithm because we have an empty frame. The same thing for 0 and 1. At this point, we have 7, 0, 1 3-page faults, and we did not use replacement algorithm. However, when the process references an address within page 2 is not in memory, and we don't have an empty frame. So the replacement algorithm is invoked, which is basically, in this case, optimal. Optimal says, look at the future, see which one of these pages in memory will be referenced last. Right? And then that's the victim. So if you look at the future, starting from this point, we find that 0, which is in memory here, okay, being or is going to be referenced soon. And then after that, we find that we have also 1, okay, which is here in memory, to be referenced what? Soon. So 0 and 1 are safe, which means the last one, 7, is the one that will be referenced far in the future. So 7 is chosen to be what? The victim, right? So what we do from the point where we're going to do the page replacement, search to the right, the future, and the last that you will find out of this in memory is your victim for replacement. Okay? That's optimal. Other algorithms, the most famous one of them is called the least recently used algorithm. Least recently used algorithm. So we're going to replace the page that is the least recent use. Recent, so we're talking about what? Past. Okay? So at this point, we look back and we found which one is the eldest in terms of reference. Okay? The farthest in terms of reference, and that will be the page to be replaced. For example, show you this. Again, for this reference string, 701, they are swapped in and we have 3-page faults, but we did not use a replacement algorithm at this point, 701. And then we have the process referencing a logical address within page 2. Page 2 is not in memory, so what we need is to use a page replacement algorithm, which is in this case LRU. LRU says, okay, find these pages in the history, back. Which one is the least recent use of them is the victim. Okay, so starting at this point, I find page 1 just being used. And then 0 as well. The last that had been used is what? 7. So 7 is the victim. So 2 will replace 7. Then the process reference is 0. 0 is already in memory, so not even a page fault. And then 3 is not in memory. So now what we need to do is to find out which one of these 3 pages will be the victim. We do the same thing. Okay, look back at the past, the history, trying to find these 3. The last one that you will find is what? The victim. Okay, so from this point, I found 0, so 0 is safe, just being used. Found 2, and the last to find is 1. So 1 is the victim. So 3 will replace 1, and we continue that way. Is it clear? Okay, excellent. There are also other algorithms as well. For example, we have an algorithm that is least frequently used and most frequently used. These two algorithms. Least frequently used is the page to be chosen as a victim. Or the most frequently used page is the one to be chosen as a victim. These two, they are the opposite of each other, no another, right? So the philosophy of the least frequently used replace a page that is not frequently used, the least of them all. It means that most likely it will not be referenced later on, or it will has the least reference. So it is a potential victim. However, the most frequently used algorithm, the philosophy of it is that find the page that is most frequently referenced out of them all. Choose it as a victim because most likely it had been consumed. The process will not reference it anymore because it had been referencing it many times already. See, philosophies, right? And in fact, like a simulation of these two algorithms with, the usual kind of referencing of processes, okay, not with special cases in general, okay, found that the performance of the two is almost the same. Similar performance, okay, with different sets of referencing. Okay. That was about page replacement, right? Later we will visit page replacement again to talk about how to implement some of these page replacement algorithms in terms of actual implementation of them. But first we look at the page table. So far we have been saying that it's a table which is if you visit one of its locations by an index, right, then you will find the physical address of the frame in which that page is located, right? So if I go to index 3 of a page table, means that's the 4th page, and what I will have in there? I will have in there the physical address of the frame. So that's how I can visualize the page table. It's basically a table, okay, or a list of physical addresses of frames, right? Or frame numbers. Frame numbers, correct? It's frame numbers or physical addresses of frames. Which one? Frame numbers. Because the mapping here is page to frame, right? Page to frame. And if we already know the physical memory that we have in the system and the size of the page table, then basically, if you are given the frame number, then you can know the actual physical address of that frame number, isn't it? Right? Because you have to multiply it by what? The size of the frame. Correct? Okay. So that's the mapping. However, the page table has something more than that. It has more than that. I think you have seen that one additional entry to the page table is the bit which is valid, invalid bit. Do you remember that? Valid and invalid bit. And what is it used for in a page table? Excellent. So it is used to know whether the page is in memory or not, right? Is in memory or not. So if I have a page, if I have a process that needs like 100 pages, okay, then I would have a page table of 100 entries, okay, but not necessarily that all of these pages, they have frame numbers mapped to, okay? So those that they will have that, okay, they have the valid invalid bit to be what? 1, okay? Means it is in memory and it had been mapped to a frame. If 0 means it's not. So the page table got some other information, okay? And later on you will see that actually it will have some other additional bits that we can use to know whether this frame had been modified while it's in memory or not, okay? Because in page replacement, what do we do? What do we do once we find the victim? Swap it out, right? Swap it out. Swap it out means write it to the swap, right? Write it to the swap. But it's already there on the swap, right? It's there on the swap. All the pages of a process are in the swap. But we mentioned that the swap could be the swap partition or a swap file, right? Okay? Then, when a victim is chosen to be replaced, we write it to the swap. Only when it had been modified while it was in memory, right? If it was not modified while it's in memory, do I need to write it? I don't need to write it back to the swap. It's there. It's the same copy, right? Then, the question is, how would I know that it had been modified or no? Will I compare them? No. There will be a bit in there, okay, in the page table also. Whenever a page is modified, that bit is changed to 1 to indicate that this page had been modified while it was in memory. So if it had been chosen as a victim, we look at the modified bit. If it's 1, then we have to write it. If it's 0, no need to write it. Right? Just overwrite it or do something else which we're going to look at next time. Okay. There is much more than that as well in the page table. Other bits that has some other meaning also. So the page table, okay, it has entries in general, right? And each page table entry, okay, is usually 4 bytes long. 4 bytes. Talking about 32-bit, right? So 32-bit can point to 2 to the power 32 physical page frames. Physical page frames, okay? And if a frame has a particular size, for example, 4 kilobyte, which is 2 to the power 12, then can point to 2 to the power 32 frames. Each of them is of size 2 to the power 12, which means we can reference 2 to the power 44 bytes of physical memory. And that is what? 16 terabyte of memory, okay? Which means it's more than enough to have what? The 4 bytes as the size of an entry in the page table, right? Okay. Now, how these page tables are stored? Some operating systems, for each process, they will have a page table. Okay? And the address of that page table in memory is saved in the process control block of the process. For example, in Linux, you have like task underscore struct, which is the process control block of a process, right? One of its attributes is a reference to the page table in memory for that process. Okay? So that later on can be accessed while the process is executing. However, some other operating systems, they won't do that. They will have only one page table in the whole system for all the processes. For all the processes. However, the page table is a mapping, a page index or a page number to a frame index or a frame number. Now, I could have a process 1 has 4 frames, 0, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, has 4 pages, 0, 1, 2, 3. And I have process 2 has also similar things. Okay? 0, 1, 2, 3, say 4, 5. Okay? The index now, there's what? Intersection between the indices of them, right? The very first indices, I refer to it, the very fourth indices, 0, 1, 2, 3. Correct? Then, when I look up a page in a page table to find the frame number, I need some additional information, which is basically what? Process PID, right? Process PID. So you need two keys. So the key is what? A composite of 2 things, the process ID and the page number, so that you can look up the frame index in which that frame is mapped. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so that's the representation. On the other hand, also, the list of empty frames in memory also should be known by the OS for the assignment. Okay, for the assignment of page to frame. And I think we have seen that in one of the figures, if you remember, free frame list, we call it, right? Free frame list, which are the indices of the frames that are not used, available. So when the mapping is done, okay, by the system, these frames, some of these frames are chosen to what? The requirement of a process for a page, to map for the requirement of a process for number of pages. Okay. Now, how is it implemented, the page table? So far, we've been saying it's a table in memory. Correct? Okay. But also, there are some other implementations of the page table. Okay. And can be used together with what? With a page table in memory. Or without that, at all. For example, if what we're referring to is only like a few pages, then we could have kind of a set of registers, okay, to hold the frame index, okay, for each one of these pages. And we're done. But we need number of registers to do that, right? And we can just have it for a process that needs like 1,000 pages, okay? Or even sometimes much more than that, okay? So there are different ways actually of implementing that. Another way, I think, which you have come across, the TLB. The TLB way for looking up the mapping between a page and a frame. So we're going to look at that in this regard. So we can use a set of dedicated registers. For example, this is implemented in this architecture. The address consists of 16 bits, 2 to the power 16. And the page size is 2 to the power 13. So the page table, it has 2 to the power 3, okay, entries. 2 to the power 3 entries. So if the page table has only 8 entries, I'll use these registers, no problem. But if it has more, this won't work for me. So this is the fastest implementation ever, register, okay? Very fast access. However, this isn't really satisfactory for most of the processes who would need much more than that. This is an example of it. So, so another way to implement it is by using what? A register to hold only the address of the page table in memory. And the actual page table is in where? Is in memory. This is what we've been telling since the very beginning when we started to talk about paging. A table in memory, the address of it, okay, is loaded in a register, okay, and initially it is in the process control block of a process. So whenever it needed to be accessed, we just need to know where to go in memory to find that page table. So that is in page table based register. So PTPR is the register that holds the page table address in memory for a particular process. Okay. The third implementation is by using TLB. So this TLB, which is short for translation look-aside buffer, we have certain storage, okay, within this TLB, and this has two parts. One for page, another for frame, each storage for a TLB. Now, it depends on the duplication of these components in the TLB. Here we're talking about what? Hardware components. Hardware components. In terms of pairs. One to hold the page, and the other to hold what? The frame. Okay? The limitation here is the number of these pairs available with TLB. We can't have it for processes that need, just now you're seeing, okay, 2 to the power of millions of bytes, right? In terms of that. So we still have limitations, but these limitations are not up to that of using registers, okay? So what happens is like this. I'll explain it with this slide, and you will find that what I'm talking about is on the previous slide. This hardware of TLB, whenever a CPU references a logical address, which is in combination, okay, in a format of a page and an offset, then the page is used as the lookup in TLB, okay? Now this page, if it's in there within the TLB, then directly we can access the frame number, right? We can directly know the frame. But if it's, and we call this what? A hit, TLB hit. We were looking for a frame given a page. The page is the key, The value is the frame. So you have key value, right? If it's there in TLB, then TLB hit direct. You get access. Now what we need is only to access the memory that is referenced by this frame. Okay? In terms, so that we can access the actual bytes that are required by the CPU. But if the page is not there in TLB, then this is TLB miss. The page is not there. Okay? And in this case, what do we need to do? We need to find it first, right? So we need to find it. Where to find it? Page table, right? Is in page table. Now, and then we bring it in, and then it has to be replacing what? One of those in TLB again by another replacement algorithm. But here is very much like the concept of what? Caching, right? Cache. Now, there is one measure for this. It's called the effective access time, the EAT. And if we say that the percentage of the hit ratio, it means that when we reference a page, the base is already there in TLB, right? The percentage of that is alpha. Then the percentage of the miss ratio is what? 1 minus alpha. Then the effective access time is m plus epsilon multiplied by alpha plus 2m plus epsilon multiplied by 1 minus alpha, where m the time that you need to access the memory, right? In a miss, I need to do that twice, right? In a hit, only once. And this is, of course, for the TLB. Now, the structure of the page table. So we found that there is a page table in memory as well, right? But there is a hardware support as well, which is the TLB. TLB. The structure of the page table in memory could be flat structure, basically just a table. And it could be hierarchical, hashed, or inverted page table. So what are these? In hierarchical page table, this is used for page tables that are too long. So basically what do we do is to divide them into sub-page tables. Sub-page tables. Then in this case we have the very first outer page table. It is actually holding references to sub-page tables. Sub-page tables. And then these sub-page tables, they actually have pages and they're mapping to frames in memory. This is a hierarchical view of it, and it could be 2 levels of hierarchy, 3 levels of hierarchy, or even 4 levels of hierarchy, which means the most inner page table, it has our understanding of a page table. Basically holds the references for the frames and so on. Like this. This is the most inner. The outers, we're going to order them. Outer 1, outer 2, outer 3. So one inner and multiple outers. Okay? For example, this is a 2-level paging. So I have, this is the outer, this is the inner, P2, and this is D. So now the virtual address consists of 3 entries. Okay? The offset and the page number. Yeah. And I also need what? The page table. The page table as well. So I can have like 12 bits for the page table, which means I have 2 to the power 12 number of these sub-page tables. And in each one, I have what? 2 to the power n right? And here I have what? 2 to the power 10, right? In terms of the size of the page itself, right? Okay, so this is the inner and outer. This is another representation where I would have 3-level hierarchy. So I have offset, inner, outer, and then second outer as well. That concept. Hashed page table, one important thing is the time that is needed to look up an entry in the page table. So when it's hashed, you directly go to where you find the frame number, right? But however, when we use hashing, okay, we're going to use a hash function. And that has function for 2 different entries, which means 2 different pages. It might result in what? One output, same output. Which means we might hash 2 different pages in the same location. You know the concept of hash function, right? Yes? So hash function here, you feed it to the page number, it produces an index in a table where you will find the frame number here. However, I might give P1, it gives me this location. I might give P5, it gives me again the same location. This results in what we call collision, right? So collision can be saved using what? A list at the collision, because we still have to use that hash function. So we can use a list to resolve the collision, or we can use buckets, or we can use a heap, okay? Any one of these can be used for collision, to solve the collision. So now, what's the point? I don't want to search linearly, but I still have here to do the search linearly, right? For lookup. However, if you compare the length of this collision list to the length of this list, it's nothing, right? It's too small in terms of comparison. So we're still gaining a lot in there. And the last one is called the inverted page table, okay, in terms of representation of it, which is what we talked about. One page table for all processes, and basically to look up a frame, what you need, you will need the PID of the process as well as the page number. Both of them will be the key. And your value, of course, is the frame.